a playlist original.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Live or die. Make your choice.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly. They're here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face, the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your hosts, Gaius and Jackson, with more tales of horror for spooky season. How you doing, buddy?
I'm well. We're into it now. Loving it. Spooky season is well underway. Fantastic start so far. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I'm very excited about recording today because we're doing two, and they're both really fun movies. I think are they both first time watches for you?
They were absolutely, yes.
Right. So we all know, like, in addition to like doing the normal show, we also like highlight movie anniversaries, and thankfully we had 2 spooky season movie anniversaries to kind of get into, so it was perfect timing. The first one we're going to be talking about today is Urban Legend, which turns 25 years old. Another movie from the year that Jackson was born.
That's right. Yeah, many of them are this year. That's right.
But as you guys noticed with spooky season so far, we've been highlighting different whether it's horror movie podcasts, YouTube channels, fans. We wanted guests on that also loved horror, and this one will be no exception. So we have on with us today Zach Sherry, who I've been actually following for a while. We were just talking about that offline, and this is actually the first time we've actually really like spoken, I guess, like in length, other than like a few messages going back and forth on Instagram. So thank you for joining us today, Zach.
Yes, welcome, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Zach, so I when I sent messages out for some of the stuff for these episodes, he was one of the first few people I messaged, and he was very like honest. He's like, I think the only one in that group for the September ones that I would have any authority speaking on is Urban Legend. So I was like, perfect. So it seems like it's like right up your alley.
I don't even think I heard of. I mean, I've heard of some of the movies you mentioned, but I definitely have not seen them. Urban Legend was the only one that I've seen.
Well, you should be a perfect match then. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There are certain movies that are in certain people's wheelhouses. I know that as Jackson knows, like the only reason Mark J. Parker isn't on this episode with us, who would normally be on
I was totally expecting him to be here.
Night. I know he's usually been a guest on any late 90s horror teen movie that we've talked about. He actually is going to, I think, be covering Urban Legend for his show. So he wanted to save
I thought
some of his
that was the reason.
for his own
Makes
thing.
complete sense. Yeah, well,
perfect.
I'm sure he'll join us in spirit.
Great.
I'm sure he's listening.
Yeah.
Yes, shout out, Mark.
Yeah, you'll probably feel some of his. There's actually, I feel like we've been doing this. There's been no bigger authority on that time period of teen movies and horror than Mark. So yeah, hopefully we'll feel
that niche for sure.
Yeah. But we have Zach today, and we want to highlight some of the stuff that you've been doing, and we want to kind of get a little bit more about you, how you started your YouTube channel, what's it all about. Let all the listeners out there know how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the platform to speak about it. It's been so long now because I started my channel in 2019, just at like the tail end of 2019. So it was like right before
COVID.
the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like it it was really kind of like good timing on my part to have kind of set the foundation for it to begin with, because I wasn't like a big channel or anything at that time. I had literally just started, and it was just one of those things. Like I spent a lot of time watching YouTube, like probably a lot of people, and it was just one of those things that dawned on me one day. It's just like I should do this. And for most people who like do take on like creative endeavors like that, you probably know like it's not as easy as it sounds. Like, you know, you
Of course.
you envision it, and you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna totally manifest that, and then you turn on a camera or whatever, and it's like, what do I say? And for a while it was like that. Like I really had to kind of work up the nerve to do it, and just to like speak into a camera when no one else is there in the room, essentially. And it was challenging. It wasn't an overnight thing. There's a lot of components to like making YouTube videos and stuff that I guess most of us probably think like, okay, that's what it's going to be right off the bat. And the true experience is that like you have to be bad at it first to kind of, like,
Yes.
to like grow into it, and just and be at a place where it does look professional and all that. And the funny thing is, I still will make videos now, and I don't feel like confident about them, or I just feel like, oh, this is not my best quality. But then people will tell me like, oh wow, like this is like really high end, or this and that. And I just, oh, thank you.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, like I appreciate that, because it's like it's not my perspective of myself or the work that I do. So it's always kind of this rat race against yourself. Like I feel like I've only ever competed against myself, and just in terms of content creation, because I always just try to be better than I was
Right.
the before that. And so that's kind of been this journey over I guess it's been 4 years now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Almost
On it.
October.
Congratulations.
Yeah, will be 4. Thank you. And it was, I didn't have like a plan or anything going in. I just knew that it was going to be like movie based, like probably very much like you do, because you cover like like it runs the gamut. Like you talk about everything. Right. And I think that was kind of my mindset. I was just going to like go watch as many movies as I could, and then like review them, essentially. And the more and more I got into it, the farther away I got from that. Like I don't really review movies. I more so do like really niche kind of like deep dives into things, and kind of like Easter egg sort of things, or just kind of like hypothetical ideas. Because I really like kind of honed in on the horror genre, because it seemed like most of my audience at the time were responding more so to horror. And it was just one of those things like, oh, I like horror more than any of these things, so why don't I just kind of focus on that? And then yeah, it did become very Scream centric to a point as well. Like people will say like I'm a Scream channel, because I mean there's a lot of Scream content, but I do like to, you know, cover other things as well. I just haven't really had an opportunity, because so much of what is like the call for the content I do is Scream related. So it's been a lot of that, and it came at a good time, because like the announcement for Scream 5 kind of followed very shortly, and that was the first thing that got the ball rolling, just in terms of like getting momentum for my channel. And I was covering like news and theories about it, and I quickly like realized like, okay, I'm not really enjoying doing reviews of things. I'm not really enjoying covering news. And then I think like the big thing that I did that kind of skyrocketed my channel was a video that I did for Who Killed Who. And it was specifically in the opening scene of the original movie with like the Drew Barrymore scene. And I did this like really intricate, almost like a PowerPoint presentation. Like it was something I designed on Keynote. It was like a map of the house and just like where the characters were at the time and just like why this was Killer 1 and why this was Killer 2. And that like became really popular. And then I just started doing it for like the entire movie. And then for the sequel and Scream 3 and Scream 4. And then when the new movie came out, it was like, well, you have to do this for that. And currently I'm working on the one for the most recent one. But those were kind of the videos that just like blew up and everyone wanted to know about that. Because nobody was really like before Scream 5 came out, the fandom was really dormant, right? Like nobody was really talking much about
it had been a decade.
Yeah, and it's funny because nobody ever really kind of brought up that idea of just like, well, who was it behind the mask? Like we know who the killers were, but we don't know who actually did what murder. So I was kind of, I mean, not to like toot my own horn or anything, but like I was the one that kind of like brought that question into the mainstream, because now like everyone has their own opinion about what like who they think it was, and it's like it's kind of like a big deal now. So I'm happy that I could be the one to kind of facilitate such a niche question that people have, but a popular one.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny the Who Killed Hill thing. Like we kind of occasionally bring that up with like some of my friends and everything, like trying to figure out like, the first movie, was it Billy or was it Stu that did this one or did that one? And like, going back and forth. I know with Scream 5, the big debate was like, I not understanding how it could possibly be, what was it, Amber that killed Dewey? Yeah. They're like, because I think she grew about a foot, and if you really were like
a little bit of a stretch,
that was her. Assume that was her. Since we have you like talking about Scream, I do want to, because I never actually asked you, but what were your thoughts on overall Scream 5 and then Scream 6 compared to the other ones?
No, that's fair. Scream 5, I really loved it. I think that I do have issues with it. I think that like my biggest thing with movies in general is continuity. And just like logic and like practicality of things. Like I like things to make sense. And Wes Craven was very much that director. Like he kind of went into all these projects with this eagle eye, and he was just like, no, I don't want to have things on the screen in my movie that people are going to question. And I think for the most part, like the first 3 movies, they're pretty solid. 4, just because of the production meddling, like there's some questionable things in there because so much was cut out. But that's probably why I connect so much with the movies and that whole like Who Killed Who aspect, because it's he was so meticulous with detail and continuity and stuff like that. And I think that with 5, like it's a movie that's like hits all the right beats emotionally. I feel that it was a very good way to kind of come back to the franchise after being absent for so long. But I do have issues with 2 things, just kind of like continuity stuff. There's a lot of kind of mishandling of the mythology, we'll say, especially when it comes to like the Stab franchise of it all. And there was just kind of like illogical things in the script that I wasn't too happy about. Just sort of things that are, I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, lazy screenwriting. But the script overall was pretty fantastic, and I left that movie feeling really good about it. I went back and I saw it several more times, and like each time I watched it, I still loved it. Like there's some pacing issues with the movie, but like besides that, I think that it maintained the quality of the franchise, because I feel that to that point, Scream had just been consistently good. Even at the movies that were the worst ones, because everyone has their own opinion of which is the worst Scream. They're all fantastic. And then 6 came out, and it came out very quickly. Like the
turnaround was very fast.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it was rushed, but it kind of felt phoned in. Just kind of like now observing this, how far are we? Like more than 6 months whenever it was released back in March. And uh, there's just things about it. Like I feel that the issues that I had with 5, which I was hoping like once they got to 6, they would have like ironed those out. I felt like that wasn't the case, and they actually abandoned the things that I did like that did work for 5, and they really leaned in more heavily on the things that were not working with Scream 5, and that's predominantly what Scream 6 is to me. Like it kind of feels like there just wasn't the effort that was put into it. I don't think that they approached it the same way that the previous 5 movies had been approached, especially the ones that Wes Craven had done. And I don't know. I don't want to get too much into it because like it's it's the one Scream movie that I'll say that I don't like it. I'm not a huge fan of it, and I think that it kind of threw off the momentum of the franchise. And it's the one movie that I think is now kind of like, for me, the black sheep that doesn't make it a consistent franchise. And that's what I'm kind of having trouble with when it comes to that movie.
So I remember, Jackson, you had your own issues with 5.
We're on opposite pages, it sounds like. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
5 didn't do anything for me, but 6 redeemed 5, if you will. But I'm on the same page in the sense that like Wes Craven's movies are like the 4. Those are the solid core, the ones that I value. I think they've done all right without him, but that being said, like I was kind of like okay if we had never seen Scream again. Like I think it exists in its own pocket of the horror community, and I really liked the first 4. But I at least thought 6 was an improvement. But that being said, I've only seen each once, and you know how it goes with rewatches. That very well might change, and I anticipate I'll see them again. But I will be interested to see how that opinion changes on rewatch.
Yeah, it's just interesting too. I remember talking about it with Jackson because I told him like I saw Scream 5 first at a press screening for work, and that's just different. I mean,
that environment was awesome.
Yeah, and then I think I saw it on opening night with like a crowd, and then that was really fun. And I think I was telling Jackson, I was like, dude, I think I was just so hyped up and excited that we had a new Scream movie that I kind of unconditionally loved it without really thinking about like, oh, like were there issues? No, I really wasn't thinking about the
that's fair. Exactly. I mean, you're in it to want to love it, and that's totally fair.
Yeah, I just remember being like, yeah. I mean, does it make sense that Sydney's in this one? Does it feel like she's shoehorned in a little bit? And I think at the beginning I was like, no, it's perfectly fine. They use her just fine. And then I watched it several more times after, and I was like, all right, maybe she's shoehorned in. Maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense that she's there.
Right.
But who cares? I love Deb Campbell and I love Sydney.
Exactly. And that's what matters.
And then also with the 6th one, even though in there, that whole debate about her not being brought back over pay and like her not earning her worth, I still felt like during 6, though, even though I would have loved to have Sydney there because she's such a big part of the franchise, it also is like they were able to do it without her. I thought it was fine that like she wasn't there, and they kind of it held its own without having that character there. So I thought that worked.
Agreed. Yeah.
There was stuff about Scream 6 I thought like was really fun, and I've only watched it twice. Actually 3 times since it came out, and it was fun. But I understand. Like I remember when you posted about that, Zach, you had some issues with Scream 6, and they were all points I understood though. Even though I had fun with it and enjoyed it, they were also things that I was like, all right, but that what he's saying makes sense. And like so, I totally understand.
I understand sort of like the perspective that you have, Jackson, of just like sort of like 6 being a better movie than 5, because I think in some ways it is like it's much better paced. There's a lot of action that like it's the longest Scream movie, and it all goes by like really quickly. But like what I've kind of like noticed and like unraveled is that a lot of it just feels very empty. Just like kind of like the set pieces, they're not really kind of put together in a very like organized or meaningful way. It's just like things happening, and as soon as they happen, they're forgotten about. And I think like I know that there's a lot of comparisons to Scream 2 because they're just kind of like, oh, we really want to get it's almost like a spiritual sequel to Scream 2 in a way. And when I think of Scream 2, I think of like every set piece in that movie, like starting with the opening scene with Jada Pinkett in the theater. That scene has lasting consequences or just like ramifications on everything that happens after that. That's sort of the thing that sets, it's like the inciting event. It sets everything in motion. In Scream 6, all the stuff that happens in the beginning is completely inconsequential to anything that happens as soon as the title card comes up. The scene with Sarah Michelle Gellar in Scream 2, even though she's kind of like in a movie of her own, she doesn't really have any connection to any of the characters. It's still like, I feel like Wes created that moment in a way to kind of like connect her with the audience, that we do feel a loss there. And just because Sydney is such like an empathetic character, she's feels guilty and like, you know, is beating herself up after the fact of just like this stranger that she didn't even know. There's like actually a loss there. When you look at this, like all these scenes in Scream 6, it's like the bodega, even like the apartment scene. There's people who are being killed who are just, they're basically extras. Like they're Mindy's girlfriend dies, and
you're like,
yeah,
Right.
like her, yeah, like the character Annika, like she dies, she falls off the ladder, and that should have been like, I think of like the whole cast, she was the most substantial
Expendable?
character that like
of the newbies.
just,
Right.
yeah, or just like of the people who died in that movie. And I feel like even after that, she's never mentioned again. Mindy,
Yeah.
her own girlfriend, doesn't really
They
seem
move
to-
right on from her death.
They move on really,
And that's right. Yeah.
and it's just like, and maybe that's what people like, is just like sort of like the pacing of it all. But it just like, to me, it just it feels empty. It just feels like a shell of a Scream movie. You know, like Scream 2 again, like Randy, his death, it had like a huge impact moving on. And then by the time we get to those later set pieces, like the Gail chase through the sound studio, and then Sydney and Hallie crawling out of the car, like I feel like those scenes were earned. Like we kind of like built up to them. And here it feels like the writers and Radio Silence were just like throwing everything out there, just kind of like, okay, let's do this and this and this, without really like stopping to like allow us to become absorbed into it. And then as soon as it was done, it was done. Like we forget about it. Gail and her scene, that's not even mentioned again after she's out of the movie. The subway thing is not even like, it doesn't stick with you. So it's like all those scenes are really good to kind of like keep the action going and the pace up. But like once they're done, it's just, you kind of forget about them. And that's sort of like where I'm left with Scream 6. It's just like, what did it all mean?
Yeah. Also the fact that Annika aside, they're way too afraid to kill any of their new characters, which is just ridiculous. Especially I can't remember the guy's name, but the one that gets literally stabbed 40 times in the theater near the end. He's one of the core four. Like that was kind of tough to rationalize, because you literally sell it like he's done, and that would have been a very impactful death just for him to be clinging on at the end. Gail too, like, was a big one. Like, I didn't want Gail to die, but it was again, it's a trope in that series that's getting very overused, where teasing a character's death just for them to still be hanging on. But I'm with you. I'm definitely in the school of enjoying the first four more, but I'm okay with seeing another one.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Absolutely. You know what's interesting? I didn't really think about the way that you talked about like the Sarah Michelle Gellar scene, like with Cece, and how like on paper it seems like just a random, like she's in what, 2 scenes of the movie, and it does seem like she is isolated from like the rest of like what is going on. But like you're right, that her the impact of that still matters because of what it does to like Sydney and how she feels that like this thing from like her life is kind of followed her here, and like this random person that she didn't know got murdered, you know, kind of because of that. And like that and so those scenes actually do matter, and they're not just hey, we just have to insert a kill scene here just to insert one here. It does kind of matter to the rest of the film. And I never really thought about it like that, because I think for some people that like something like her scene would be like, oh, like, well, okay, it was fun at the time because she was super huge at the time, so like we'll just have her randomly be in the movie and whatever. And I'm sure it is viewed by some like that, but like the way you looked at it, I've never really looked at it like that before. But it is true that it's not just like a kind of throwaway scene at the end of the day. Like it does, all the scenes in that movie matter. To get you to point A to point B, and yeah, and in Scream 6, like you said, there are a lot of cool set pieces, like and they're fun in the moment. Like you said, it moves the action along, but. Yeah, it's always interesting when someone makes you think about something that you really like. Yeah. Like, I had fun with that. And you're like, perhaps I was wrong.
And it's not my intention. Like, I get a lot of shit for like people are just like, I have like some sort of agenda where I'm trying to like turn people against things or just like see my perspective. Like, I want people to have their own perspectives.
Exactly.
I would absolutely hate if like I liked the same things that everyone else liked. Like when I have a thing that's my thing and nobody else like either likes it or knows about it, like I kind of feel special about that. So
yeah,
you should.
Yeah, when people say like, you know, or just like accuse me of like having some agenda, like I have this like anti-Scream 6 tirade. I'm trying to turn people against it. I'm like, no, I'm just expressing my opinion about it because I want them to do it differently moving forward.
You know, exactly.
Yeah, like I just want to see something more in the line with like what I had known the franchise to be and what I think that it would be more successful as. Like I hate to like say that I'm like speaking from authority, but like I've watched these movies so many times. I've watched many like horror movies of this ilk, like the one we're going to talk about today, and I don't know like everything, but I know what I like. And I know that there's a lot of people who also like the same thing that I like. And I think that there was a way to do Scream 6 that like probably could have been more effective and kind of been a little bit like just had the fan base come together a little bit more cohesively of just like everyone kind of finding something to enjoy about it. Because like as it is right now, like 5 and 6, they have been very polarizing. You know, people either seem to love them or hate them. And I think that there's a way to kind of make everyone happy without, making everyone miserable, we'll say. And I hope that like Scream 7, when they get around to that there's a way to kind of shift away from just like kind of the direction that they've been heading in.
Right. I like that there's going to be some time removed. I mean, but consequently because of like the strike and stuff, like they, there's going to be a bigger gap between
force them,
between movies. How do you are you good with Christopher Landon taking over over the Radio Silence guys?
I haven't given it like a whole lot of thought because I mean I'm not necessarily on a Scream wave right now or just like a Scream 7 wave because of you. Like most franchises, there's one movie that you don't love, and then you kind of like dip out for a little bit. So that's kind of where I am. But with Christopher Landon, I'm interested for sure. I think that he's going to direct it in a much different way than Radio Silence did because Chris Landon has experience in all corners of filmmaking. Like he's been a writer, he's been a director, he's been a producer. So Radio Silence, they were just kind of like directors. They pretty much took everything that was on the script and they translated that to the screen. Like in that sense, they're very technical at what they do. And that's not to say that they don't do a good job because there was a lot in both of those movies that they did that I did think that was really well done. And I did appreciate their approach to certain things. Like I like how they had said, like in the subway scene in particular, like most studios would be like, well, we're going to do like green screens for this or whatever. They're like, no, we want to do this practically and things like that. So they have a very like old school style approach to it, which I liked, but I don't think that at any point that they ever really challenged the material in the way that Wes Craven did, because he would come in and he would look at like whether it was Kevin Williamson's script or Aaron Kruger's in Scream 3, Scream 4, and he would go in and he would do his uncredited rewrites or just be like, I don't think that this is working. I think that we should try it this way. And I just don't think that, I'm not even that I don't think, I know that Radio Silence did not do any of that because if you look at the first draft of both of the Scream movies or even like the shooting script, it's like nothing was changed. They basically had the movie that the writers wrote and then did it that way. So most of my grievances are with the writers. Again, not to say like they're terrible. I think that they did bring a lot of great ideas to the franchise, more so in the 5th movie,
But they could have
because
been
there's a lot of
fine-tuned.
ideas. Yeah, there's a lot of ideas in the 6th one that I feel like were just kind of put there and not really thought out or expanded upon. But I just think that it requires maybe somebody to kind of like come in and look at it in a way, and especially if it's the director like Christopher Landon, I think that he could potentially kind of anchor them and just sort of just be like, let's try it this way, let's try it that way. So it's strange because I don't know who's running that show over there. Like it feels like it's James Vanderbilt, one of the writers, because I never really got the sense that Radio Silence was kind of like in control of things. So I don't know if Christopher Landon would like come in and be the one who, you know, kind of has more clout or just sort of like that pedigree of, you know, like his career up to that point to just kind of come in and make those executive decisions. But I hope they're listening to the fan base, like to a point. I feel like you can't like acquiesce to everything that we want, but I think that you have to listen to the criticism.
When that happens, you get an Alien Covenant from Ridley Scott, and then you piss off the fan base that enjoyed what came before it, and when you go do a 180. So I agree. No, hopefully they listen to some criticisms, but still are able to make the movie their own.
Yeah,
dude, that's a great example, Jackson, where it's like Prometheus is like, oh, that was too thought provoking and too slow. We want more action.
Not enough alien,
Covenant, and not enough aliens, and the Alien Covenant is like mostly action. Like, oh, that was too much action.
And then there's me. I love both for what they are. But I know they're very polarizing. But hopefully we don't get that with Screen 7. But I do think that the strikes are going to work to that movie's benefit.
To like kind of have a pause. Yeah,
exactly.
Because I remember, I mean, like that turnaround from Scream 5 to Scream 6, it's so fast.
Which is funny. It's like also reminiscent of 1 and 2, right? In the sense that that's
like really
quick. Funny how that turned out. How they were both turned out very quickly after another. Which I think I don't know if that's giving them too much credit, but part of me thinks maybe that was a little bit intentional, but I have no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you'll have people that like when they look at Scream 2 and Scream 6, they'll be like, oh, like that's great. It's like they're paying homage to like Scream 2. And then other people will be like, well, no, that just seems like lazy to just kind of like almost it feels like a carbon copy of Scream 2 and a lot of the beats. And then people will be upset about that. They're like, oh, that was just lazy writing, or like, it was very easy to just kind of piggyback off of, you know.
I still don't know where I lie, to be honest.
Honestly, the Scream 2 script, like whatever it had originally been, because Kevin wrote that before they even did like film Scream 1. So he already had the concept and like at least part of the script done for the sequel. And if you find that script online, like even it's hard to really find like the true version of that script because there were so many like dummy scripts that they threw out there for the whole thing. But like most of it, like the Scream 2 script just reads very bland and generic. Like it's amazing that the movie turned out that way. But, you know, like Kevin would put his little notes in there of just saying like, Wes will make it scary. And I think that's essentially what Wes Craven did. Like he took this, like what should have never been a good movie on the paper of what Scream 2 had been written as, and he made it what it was. I mean, there are people who don't love Scream 2 the way that I do. I still think it's the best sequel of the franchise.
It's my favorite one.
Yeah. But like the cop car scene, like that wasn't even in the script that I'd ever seen. So, you know, those are the changes. Like I was saying, like that Christopher Landon will hopefully do, like just the things that Wes Craven did to his scripts to elevate them and just make them what they were. So it is a crazy turnaround because that was the smallest turnaround from 1 to 2, like less than a year. And they just made it work, and just like it just really did pop out.
Yeah, it's funny that cop car scene is actually in they talk about it on the Blu-ray for like I Know You Did Last Summer. That scene is originally in I Know You Did Last Summer. It's like scripted that way with Helen. Like the car chase scene is very different in the original script. Mm-hmm. And then like the director of I Know You Did Last Summer was like, he was like, it's so funny because like he was like, yeah, that was actually, it was scary on the page, but they thought like the way they ended up doing it is what worked. And he was like, he thought it was great later that Kevin actually got to use that scene in Scream 2. He just like, you know, just replaced, you know, them with like Sydney and Holly for that stuff in Scream 2, so he was still able to use it, and it works really well. I guess that's probably one of the best set pieces in Scream 2 because like it's so like the entire time you're just like, oh, just like climb out the car. That she like tries to take off the dude's mask, and you're like, just climb out and get out. Like, there's no need to like do all this other stuff. Yeah, it's such a
I
good,
love
like,
that when
scene. It's really
we
good
don't see.
scene.
Yeah, we don't see that any. Like, I don't think like after 2, I can't remember an instance where a character tries to unmask the killer. Like, it's the killers are always kind of like they gotta bide their time and then they like reveal their identities when they're ready. But we never see anyone kind of like go in there and try to figure it out. And I would love to see that. I would love to see, even if it was like we didn't get to see who it was, but that character saw from like their perspective, like they know who the killer is, and then the killer takes them out before they can tell anyone. Like that would just bring so much excitement to like a chase scene or something like that.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
that is interesting too. How Scream 2 turned out, like you said, as good as it did, considering how quickly they did it, and then then they had the issue with like the leak, and because the killers were, I guess, different in the original script for that than what we got. I know I'm always surprised that Scream 2 is as like polished and like fine-tuned as it is, considering how quickly it had to come out and like all the potential issues that could have like gone wrong, and then it ended up I like it. I mean, even though I think Scream is of course more you need Scream to get to where we get, not just for those sequels but for the other movies that kind of were inspired by it, like the one we're going to talk about today. But Scream 2 is very fun though. It's very like, there's something about the way it's written and the way it's directed that you can almost tell when like a certain like you're coming off of the hit and you have that kind of momentum of like, we're like you feel more, it feels more confident in a lot of ways just as a movie, and that's why I love about that second one in particular though. And but how it turned out as good as it did, considering what could have worked against it, is still crazy to me. But I guess that's the brilliance of Wes Craven though, which is what I sorely miss now. Like
there's not another like him.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Last House on the Left over the weekend with a friend who had never seen it, and I mean that movie is just, I mean, it's a lot, it's brutal, but I mean like how like someone like that can make that brutality seem like an art form in some way. And the testament of that guy's talent. I think.
Saw that for the first time last year, and that one was quite brutal.
Yeah, we watched the original and the remake back to back, and
nice.
The microwave head exploding scene at the end aside, the remake is pretty good. Like it's pretty well done, and the acting is really good. And of course, I think people will watch that one because the original is very much of its time, right? So there is stuff that still works, but there's also stuff about it that's like, oh, you can tell like when they made that. And I think for a lot of people, the remake, is a more polished, movie, and some of the like brutal scenes and like the original, like the whole assault scene, I think still works in the remake. It's still just as, in its own way, hits you just as hard,
right?
In a lot of ways. I thought they did a really good job as far as like horror movie remakes go. I think it doesn't really get talked a lot about, like as one of the good ones, and I think it is a really solid. Actually, The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, the two remakes of his Wes Craven's movies, turned out to be a lot better than they should have been. That was like my first thought for both of them when like I saw The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left.
And he produced, like he was still alive.
Yeah,
he
was
producing
alive,
all of the remakes of his movies. It's funny because it's been a while since I've seen the original Last House on the Left, and I only saw the remake once. And it's funny that you bring up the microwave thing because that is the only thing I remember. And
I guess it kind of had an impact then.
It had an impact. The thing that I like was going through my head when I saw that, it was just sort of like, I guess the guy wasn't dead enough. They had to, just like he needs to be killed.
Proper comeuppance. Yeah.
So I gotta know, because I would like to see it. Is that a microwave dropped on his head, or is his head put in a microwave?
It's put so like the guy like kind of basically paralyzes him, and he's like laying on the table, and his head's like in the microwave, and it's open, and he turns it on, and the guy's head eventually just like explodes.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
that was funny is that the reason we watched these over the weekend, because I just got the remake on Arrow that has like a 4K version of it, and it looks great. And one of the behind the scenes features though, like everyone involved, even though they loved making the movie, they talked to like Sarah Paxton and like a few other people, the actors and like the writers and stuff on it. They all were like, hey, it's a really solid movie. And they all had criticism of like, and I felt like we had a really good thing going, but like no one really wants to take credit on whose idea was it to do the microwave. Like one of the writers was like, I think it was mine, but then we were like, no, we shouldn't do it. And it was the one thing that the studio, they thought, well, like, oh, they're not going to let us do this. It's ridiculous. And the studio was like, no, we need that. That scene has to stay in there. Like we want you guys to do that. And everyone was like, everyone kind of spoke as negatively about it without sounding rude as they could. You could tell that they were like, yeah, we had a really solid movie. Everything was moving. Everything feels like fairly realistic in it leading up to that point. And they were like, but what do we know? They said the crowd really loved it. And it's like, yeah, like Zach said, it's one of the only things he really remembers so from watching it. So like it does have an impact on some level. Even when I watched it with my friend, as soon as that scene was over, he was like, man, we had a good thing going until that happened. And it's the last thing that happens in the movie too. Like the final thing that happens. Yeah. So you're like, oh, that was so good until not. Like that was so. And would the microwave work if it was open like that?
I was gonna say, like, that's why I was confused. There's no way, but obviously, movie logic and whatnot. But that's hilarious that it was a studio that decided to keep it in there. Sounds like something a studio would do. But no, I got to keep that on the watch list. That's for sure. The original is great, and I haven't seen his The Hills Have Eyes, which has always been high on my list. So that might be one to sneak in this year, maybe in October. For myself, yeah.
You got me thinking now there's like a very small subgenre of like microwave horror, which not only like has the Last House on the Left remake, but also urban legend.
There's one urban legend. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Well, now that we're on that train, we can now talk about urban legend, which works out for us because it's spooky season, of course, and like the podcast has been all horror movies all the time for for this month and next month. But we also get to celebrate its 25th anniversary. Again, another movie from the year Jackson was born. He was a wee lad when Urban Legend came out.
3 months or so old at this point. That's right.
When Urban Legend came out on September 25th, 1998. But for those that don't know, Urban Legend is directed by Jamie Blanks and written by Celio Horta, and it stars Jared Leto, Alicia Witt, Rebecca Gayheart, Tara Reid, Michael Rosenbaum, and it also has supporting performances from Robert Englund, Loretta Devine, John Neville, Brad Dourif, and Joshua Jackson popping in from Dawson's Creek. It's the first installment in the Urban Legend film series, and its plot focuses on a series of murders on the campus of a private New England university, all of which appear to be modeled after popular urban legends. The film was a commercialist success. It grossed $72.5 million worldwide on a $14 million budget, but it received mostly negative reviews from critics, and the chief criticism being that it is a blatant ripoff of Scream, and I guess we can talk about that some.
Gang members drive around at night with their headlights off, and when someone goes to flash from their high beams to warn them.
Isn't there another story about a guy with an axe hiding in a woman's backseat?
Is what we call an urban legend.
From the producer of I Know What You Did Last Summer.
And the idea of an urban legend serial killer, it's a stretch.
Urban Legend.
Bloody Mary.
Rated R.
Jackson, this was the first time watch for you, so I'll let you give your
fantastic awesome.
version. I'll let you go. I'll let you go first.
I will say, I'm conflicted. It wasn't a movie that I outwardly hated, although there was lots I took issue with. I do think there was a great 90s charm to this movie that was awesome, and there were things like, aside from the quality of the movie, like that aside, that I liked about this, like seeing Brad Dourif in the opening scene and his limited performance. He was fantastic. I've seen him in a couple things recently where I'm like, that's the guy from Cuckoo's Nest. Like, how is this the same actor?
That's Chucky.
I just discovered that today. I had no. So is he the voice of Chucky,
really?
or is he like
He's the voice of Chucky? He's the voice of Chucky. Yeah.
Is he? Does he also play like the Chucky like before he became like his soul was transferred?
Yeah, he was at the beginning.
I did not know that.
Yeah, at the beginning.
Yeah, he's in the original Child's Play, like the opening scene, because that's where he gets gunned down, and then he's also in. I believe it's Curse of Chucky. There's like flashbacks.
I haven't seen any sequels, but I love the first Child's Play. I've only seen it once.
No, it's so good.
So I've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest several times. It's been a long time since I've seen it now, but many, many times. I love him in that movie. Recently saw him in Mississippi Burning a few months ago. I didn't get the chance to mention it here. Fantastic flick. And again, I was like, that's that guy. And then seeing him in that scene, I didn't clue in it was him until I thought I recognized him. Didn't clue in until today because I had to split my watch up in a couple parts. But I was like, yeah, there he is. So seeing him was fantastic. Didn't know Jared Leto was in this movie, and I generally like him. I know he doesn't always give, the most acclaimed performances, but overall I really like him. And again, this is a movie that I didn't really know much about going forward, but again, quality of the movie aside, it was awesome to like see these urban legends that like I had grown up hearing from friends and whatnot at like school. Like we would always tell scary stories. It was a big thing in my childhood. Everyone liked to scare each other. And so seeing, I imagine a lot of those stories came from this movie or were somehow reworked in my childhood from this movie. So it was really cool to see it for the first time and like see where the inspiration for these scary stories I had grown up listening to came from. But that being aside, like I can't stop my brain from analyzing a movie like from a film perspective, and there's issues with that there. But overall, like I'd say I enjoyed the watch. Like I don't know that I was like over the moon with it. That being said, I would have loved this movie if I had seen it when it had come out. And so I'm curious, how this movie holds up for you guys over time and when you guys saw it. I know Gaius, you would have seen it, I'm sure, several times.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters when it
in
came
theaters,
out. Yeah.
I figured you would have been 14. You would have been hardly just allowed in there. And I saw it was 14A.
This was definitely one of those like back, like I've mentioned this before, back in the day where like you're too young to go see R-rated movies and we ask the person ahead of us in line, like, can we say that we're with you? And they're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like,
cool.
It's a very different time where like you thought nothing bad would happen if you like approached strangers and like gave them your money and said, can we come watch this movie with you?
Yeah.
But that's how I saw a lot of these movies in the late 90s, because it definitely was too young to go see them on our own.
Right.
It is actually, I'll let Zach go first. Actually, kind of when was your first time seeing it, and what was your thoughts then, and kind of what are your thoughts on it now?
Yeah, no, I saw it first run in the theater. This was kind of like 1998, like you've already mentioned, was a big year because you had like so many of these big horror movies, because like there was at that point Halloween H2O, I think was the summer
in August.
And I Still Know What You Did, Urban Legend, Bride of Chucky, The Faculty. So it was just like, it was a good time to be a horror fan. And this is one, like, because this at that point, like that year, most of those movies like Halloween, Bride of Chucky, and I Still Know, like, we're already like pre-existing IP. So this was like a new thing. And it was really kind of like heavily promoted as being like the urban legend serial killer, just like having that aspect about it. So I think that was definitely a draw. And of course, like anything that is Scream-esque or like Scream adjacent was also going to be a big hit. And I, at the time, I didn't really think about it very much. Like I knew that I really enjoyed the movie. I knew that it was like in that same ilk of Scream. So in my mind, I probably viewed it as that way. It's just like, oh, it's a Scream type movie. But I thought that the quality was always there for me. But when I watch it now, like I love it even more. And I would argue that it's actually not really very much Scream-like. Like there are obviously elements of it. There's like very specific beats actually that feel very much like, Sydney's arc in the first one with just like Alicia Wilt's character and the backstory and just doing that. And I'd say all of that is not handled successfully, like in the same way that it is with Neve Campbell and Scream. But this is what I love about it, because I think that like Jamie Blanks, who also did Valentine, later, which that was one that I didn't love when it came out, but like I watch it now and it's just like, as far as I'm concerned, Urban Legend and Valentine are come right after the original Scream trilogy in quality. Like if it was like 1, 2, 3 for the Scream movies, that's then Urban Legend and Valentine. And I feel that like Jamie Blanks as a director, which was pretty much a first-time director, at least anything like studio at the time that he did Urban Legend, like he was like really kind of like just approached it in a way that he was like hungry to like do this project. He was excited to work, and what he brought to it, like I feel, is like a very similar energy to what Wes Craven brought. Whereas like Wes Craven was like, very seasoned at that point. Like he had kind of like been through it. And when he did Scream, it was sort of like almost like not necessarily a last chance for him, but maybe like a second chance to like kind of come back and prove himself. And I think that like everything that Jamie Blanks was doing was just kind of like in the same vein of just like the quality and the attention to detail. Because I actually argue, I think that the movie is like technically like it's just really wonderful. Everything about it. I think that the continuity is much better than most of these movies, like especially if we compare to like the I Know What You Did Last Summers. I think that the cinematography is really great. Like the people that they got to work on this movie were all like, had like pretty substantial careers, or just like at least the talent to kind of put it into this project and make it stand out just a little bit higher than your typical average slasher. You have Christopher Young doing the score, so known for the Hellraiser movies.
Yep. Oh, nice.
Score.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah, like he went on to do, I think, like Grudge 1 and 2. He did A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It's just like there's a whole bunch of movies if you look them up. But like it's just the fact that they got almost like the perfect storm of just like all these great people. I think the cast is also phenomenal as well. And it just felt like everything came together in a movie of just like that everyone was excited to be there, with the exception of maybe Jared.
He does not talk about. I mean, I think they tried to get him to speak on Urban Legend, and it's not something he really speaks on. I mean, he's one of those. He's one of those. I mean, I think too. Like it's interesting because I think the Scream ripoff thing is fair. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, I guess the similarities too is that like Scream has a hook, right? And the hook is like someone that's taken their love for like horror movies, and that's the hook. And then the hook in this is like someone basing murders on urban legends. And I think that's where the similarities lie. And then like I don't think it's necessarily like a blatant ripoff of Scream though. But I kind of feel that maybe when Jared Leto signed on, he was like, hey, Scream was good, so maybe this will be just as good. And I don't think he really felt when he saw it and when it was done, or even while making it, that like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Everyone else that has been involved in that movie speaks very highly of it. Even today, Michael Rosenbaum talks very highly of it. Tara Reid, Alicia Witt, they've all like been like, hey, it was a fun time to like be in a movie like this. It has its fan base for sure. I mean, I think over the years, the fan base for this movie has grown a lot. A lot of people like it in a very different way than they like Scream. I mean, I think if you appreciate it for like leaning into like the camp a bit, because there is some campy stuff in it, and it works and it's fun. I kind of knew Jackson wasn't gonna love it.
How do you know why? I want to know why.
It's very much a product of its time. I mean, you can tell it feels very 1998.
You're right.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I kind of thought you might have some issues with, like some of the acting choices, like the whole backstory with Alicia Witt. Like that is, even watching it like for this, I was like, oh, this is very melodramatic and like she's doing her best. She's acting right now, guys. So there's like a lot of that. And depending on who you are, the killer reveal works or it doesn't.
I didn't see it coming. I'll put it that way. Yeah,
I will say that too. I did, like when I first saw the movie, there was no way that I landed on Rebecca Gayheart.
No, I like that part. I just want to throw in there too. Normally, a movie being a product of its time I don't take issue with that until it's sometime, and not every horror movie is guilty of this. But for me, horror is the one where I'll normally have an issue with that, because I just don't find movies at this time as scary as some contemporary stuff, which I knew at the time that you guys would have seen this was contemporary horror. But for me, it's a little different. But I love 90s and even much older. But yeah, no, you're definitely right in that sense where it felt like a 90s horror, which I'm watching a movie to be, scared. And this one doesn't do it for me. But you're right. Killer reveal was fantastic. Did not see that coming from a mile away at all.
Yeah. And we don't typically get,
it's hard to pull off.
Right. And then like when you're watching it, you're like, again, every time I watch it, I always go, does it make sense? Does it work? Do I buy it? And considering how Rebecca Gayheart sells that in the end, when it is revealed that it's her, she's so good at over the top batshit crazy.
She turns a crazy way.
I was like, I totally buy it. I can see that girl as cuckoo bananas as she was by the end of it. Totally could buy her doing everything that happens throughout the movie, and like that what sells it for me. It's like, all right, because we made the whole like comment about the Amber and Dewey thing, like, well, does it really make sense that she was the one that killed Dewey? Like, no, but like but when you're watching Urban Legend, like knowing what it like all that stuff works, because you're like, all right, I could totally see that it was her, and
right,
even physically believe that it could have been her. So that I think that kill reveal probably works a lot better than people give it credit for, because I didn't see it coming when we first saw it in theaters. I was like, oh, and maybe because like there really isn't anything thrown out there that would make you guess it's her. So there really isn't like she's not really like a red herring at all. Like she rides and dies on that plan of like being her Finn for a really long time. Like to be like, oh, like I'm one of the good guys until like she has to reveal that she's not. So yeah. I mean, it really. I give it credit for that. I was like, oh, didn't see that coming. I know a lot of my friends when we saw it in theaters, and it's just so bad. It's just, they hated the fact that it was a woman, because they're like, I just don't buy it. Like these are, I must have misogynistic 14-year-olds. Like I just don't.
See, I always loved when it was a female killer, because they were always the more interesting ones to me. But there actually there is an Easter egg in the movie of the Pendleton University, the school where they attend.
I know where you're going with this.
The school motto, which is in Latin, translates to "My best friend did it." So
I thought that was so cool.
So that's sort of awesome. Like the hint towards it. But what I especially love about this movie, and just like the rewatchability factor, that I, like what is something that is really important to me with these movies is, my desire to like go back and watch it again and again, is I think that character of Brenda really kind of sells the rewatchability, because there's nothing I have more fun with than going back and watching it through the perspective that she is the killer.
Yes, that will be fun for me to do again.
There are so many moments just watching her like just mess around with, like, especially with Alicia Witt's character Natalie, of just like how she's playing this friend, but she's just sort of like doing this like kind of like dance of just like kind of like gaslighting her, just like being a little manipulative. And there's one moment in particular which I've now just come to like headcanon, like certain things that happen when after because she's allegedly, which I don't even believe for a second, she has an interest in Paul, Jared Leto's character,
right?
And so she's jealous, or she seemingly appears jealous when she catches her with Natalie kissing Paul, and then she runs out of the party and just sits down on the steps and starts crying. And I was just like, okay, well, the scene cuts immediately, but that as soon as the scene cut, she just started laughing maniacally, because it was just like everything is coming together, everything is going to plan. And we actually, because on my podcast, we actually just covered this, so it's from when we're recording now, it's going to be released tomorrow. And Edward, who's my podcast mate, he talked about like kind of the melodramatic stuff of like the instance where Alicia Witt is like kind of looking through the yearbook, and then you start to hear like the pep rally sounds. It's just like in her head. And I was just like, well, maybe Brenda was like on the other side of the door, and she just had like a tape player, and she started playing,
messing with her,
the sounds of like a pep rally, like, because that's just like shit that I would see like Brenda doing, just having fun, which is just a very like it's one of those horror tropes that I think like it was a plot element in like Straight Jacket with Joan Crawford way back whenever that came out. So just the idea of like a killer who's like that committed to this plan that they're just doing all this shit that you could like, if you wanted to like heighten the experience for yourself, just like make all these things. The other thing is like when she's swimming and the girl walks in with the parka. And Alicia Witt's freaking out. She's trying to smash the window to get Brenda's attention. And we had to ask, like, so was that just a coincidence, or do we think that Brenda paid that girl to come in? Like, knew that Natalie was coming to like meet her, paid that girl to come in just to literally to gaslight her and just think that she was going crazy and was seeing things.
Interesting fan theory.
Yeah.
That makes more sense to me because there's no reason that girl be wearing a parka. I mean, I that was like, even now I was like, why is she wearing that to like go swimming? Let her get ready to go swimming, I guess. I mean,
interesting note about that killer's costume choice. Did you guys know like the circumstances that led to that? I was just reading this just before. Apparently, the movie was, when it was originally written, was supposed to be set in the wintertime. But I guess filming conditions were a little bit too warm, so they kind of ditched that idea. And the only thing that stuck around by the time filming started was the killer's outfit being a parka, so they just left that in there. So I thought that was quite funny.
That's hilarious. Yeah. That scene with the girl with the parka, it always reminds me of the scene in I Know You Did Last Summer where they're looking for the fisherman and it's a hot fucking July 4th day and everyone is wearing a slicker for some reason. And I was like, why is everyone like on the hottest day of the year probably there is wearing like a full-on slicker? And like you don't really think about that when you're watching it when you're young. You're like, oh, like this is suspense. Like it could be anyone in the crowd. But like when you watch it later, you're like, yeah, why it's July 4th?
Yeah,
and 100 some degrees.
Everyone in that university, because like Robert Englund's character has it. The creepy janitor has the same jacket.
Everyone has it. Yeah.
What do you guys think about the killer's costume
attire?
This movie? Yeah,
I think it works. I mean, it works enough. You know what? I don't know if this is like I feel the same way about the whole like fisherman slicker thing. I Know You Did Last Summer. It works for the attire for that particular film. It's not going to go down in the grand hall of fame of like horror movie costumes, but it's like it works.
I think it's definitely more thematic in I Know What You Did Last Summer, but it is kind of like basic here. But I still love it because it is unique to this movie.
To the movie, yeah.
And I kind of, the thing that I don't know how much we're going to talk, or if any, about the sequel. One thing that like did kind of annoy me when that movie came out is just the complete redesign, or just like using a different outfit for that killer. Because I was expecting the parka to come back, and not seeing it it kind of created a disconnect. And I felt like they should have been consistent and kept it. Because I mean, for as generic as it was, it is still unique to the urban legend IP.
Right.
I thought the parka was appropriate in the sense that it concealed the killer, but not particularly memorable in the sense that it's just a black jacket with the hood up. But I think that would be better than like some random obscure. This would have separated this movie from just being another masked killer, if you will. And I'm glad they didn't go down that route.
Yeah. And that's actually. No, I just want to say that was another thing that kind of like comes back to like the Scream correlation, which I still like argue. Like, I don't think that this is as much Scream as it feels more to me. Like the same with Valentine as well. Like Jamie Blank's doing kind of like an homage to slashers of the 80s. Because this feels to me more like it's obviously very inherently 90s, but it still has this 80s vibe to it of these movies. So, I mean, even if we're looking at it in terms of like, oh, well, it's just another Scream, it's still like, you could look at that like, well, Friday the 13th is just another Halloween. And I feel like there's enough nuance between those movies that it's just like, they are their own things. Like there was such a variety of slasher movies that came out in the 80s, and not all of them were great, but I still feel that like if we were to make a comparison to like what urban legend would be to Scream in the 80s, like I still think it's probably one of the better of that would have come out. So that's what kind of like makes it a little bit more distinct to me than just like being another Scream. Although there are components, again, like I feel like, especially with the characters, like the survivors in the end as well, like it feels like Natalie is kind of like this proxy to Sydney. Paul would sort of, because he's like the paper editor, he's like the Gale Weathers type, and then Reese is like the Dewey. So it just feels like they are kind of like, there are things that are similar that they're kind of like copying, but at the same time it's just like it feels different enough. I feel like the tone of the movie and the campiness, which I think like the campiness, like it really comes from, I mean, mostly Rebecca Gayheart, who I think is the best part of the movie. Even Robert Englund.
Oh no, she's the MVP for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, even like the small roles that you get from Robert Englund, like that's great. Like that feels like classic 80s slasher. Brad Dourif as the gas station attendant, and then we also we have Danielle Harris playing the goth roommate. So it's just there's a lot of like horror alumni.
Easter eggs. That it gets like applauded for that too. Like they were like, able to kind of get these kind of icons to like appear in like very small parts, and it kind of makes the movie stand out in a very positive way for a lot of horror fans. Because I think they think it gives it a little bit more credibility too. That they were willing to like pop into this thing for like a few and like not a huge part, but like they're still like memorable, in it. And I think that's fun. I actually like what you said about Jimmy Blanks as a director. And he, I guess, approached this movie the same way that Jim Gillespie approached I Know You Did Last Summer, where they did not feel like they were making like a slasher movie. They thought they were making like a thriller, or like a murder mystery, rather than like a slasher film. So like you can kind of tell that like they're trying to do a little bit more with it than just make it like a typical like slasher horror movie. Like I agree with you. The movie looks great. It's shot really well. Like for something that's like $14 million, like it looks very clean, and like the cinematography is great. I agree with you too. I love the score. The score is like very subtle, but it works.
It's a real orchestra too,
right,
which is pretty sweet. Like a quite big one.
And but yeah, you're right. Most of the camp does come courtesy of Rebecca Gayheart, and you do watch it differently. You're right. When you're watching it, knowing that it's her, it makes a lot of the scenes more fun. Like when she's talking about the whole thing with Damon, which is Joshua Jackson's character, and like she's going back and forth about how like it sounds like that urban legend where like the guy and the girl are making out in the car, and then like Brenda just goes like, "Oh, you were making out with him?" Like you can tell like she was just like doing that just to bother her. And like when you look at it, knowing like what she is and who she is, like you probably inside she has so much glee just like doing that to her. Like that she loves it. And like when you watch it from that perspective, it's a lot more fun being like, oh yeah, she's like, I'm just gonna pretend like I'm her best friend, but then like subtly shade her throughout the movie. And until like I have to, I guess like another way it's very similar, and I guess this happened with Scream. Like when you have the killer reveal, there was a whole like grand monologue about why they are doing this, and urban legend does have that, and like you're like, oh okay, I guess that's,
and that it's somebody from in the friend group in the circle too, like that.
In the circle.
That was one of the points to me that connected it mostly to Scream, and the meta approach to the folklore, I guess. In this case, it's urban legends versus horror movies, but yeah.
It's very tenuous. Like it's just like they're just like this week of just like this sort of like this is the backstory. But this is where my headcanon comes in, because based on the way that the movie ends, and we kind of see that this is sort of a story within a story of just like the way that they're explaining it, and she's just at this new school, or she's the one telling it. It kind of makes me think that like everything that we've heard in this movie it's unreliable. We don't know that it's actually true, which means that like she might not even have a backstory. She just might be insane. And that's what I love most about it, because it's like I don't remember, like when I think of Billy Loomis or Mrs. Loomis, like I distinctly like remember like their motive and that backstory. Whereas with Rebecca Gayheart playing Brenda, I don't really like something about her fiance or whatever. Like that's so unimportant to me. I'm in it with like her performance. Like that's the thing that's making the like that ending work for me. And I think that probably why it is so popular, because I feel that like she as a character just brings so much gay energy to the movie. And I think that it's probably actually I know that there's a lot of like the drag queen community really loves that character, and like bases their like performances and stuff off of like her, or just like the look of the character that I've like come to realize just like in the past couple of months. So she is kind of like this inspiration to a lot of people in the LGBT community. So she brings that to it. But I just love that it doesn't matter what, like, why she's doing it. It's just sort of like it's in the dialogue. It's just like all the like, lucky for you, Miss Thang, I brought a visual aid.
That part, I was gonna bring that up if no one else had. I like laughed out loud. I thought that was awesome. It's so funny.
Yeah, that was great. So there are a lot of recreation of some popular urban legends in this movie. Did you guys have any set pieces that were your favorite, like in particular, that they did in this film, as far as like recreating some of the urban legends that we kind of know and love?
I really liked the Aren't You Glad You Didn't Turn on the Light?
Yeah, that's my favorite
thought that
one,
was executed probably the best.
Yeah.
Really like that. And just we get a great tease to that earlier. Like, we have a very believable reason why she wasn't I guess what's the word I'm looking for here?
Didn't want to disturb her by turning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we had that scene where she walks in on them having sex earlier, and then she
hears
and I thought that scene was executed great. I was a little bit I know, like, growing up, like, I'd heard about the urban legend of like something being, put in the microwave, but like, and I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention at the moment or if I was just forgotten, but what was the deal with was it like a pet of Parker's that was put in the microwave? I didn't really understand what was going on.
It's a dog. And
we don't see it actually. We just see the aftermath, right?
Yeah. And that urban legend like was the old lady that puts her wet dog in the microwave to
dry
it off. Yeah. And what I love about that one being just like, I feel like by that point in the movie, they were just like throwing them all, like whatever they could throw in there.
Agreed.
Whatever sticks. And then they even like, he even gets killed with like the whole like Drano thing in the mouth. I thought that was like I don't know, there's some really fun ones, but the Aren't You Glad You Didn't Turn on the Light, I think, is the most well executed of all of them. It actually is really creepy and like it really like works because you do why she wouldn't.
100%.
Like, all right, whatever.
It's flawless.
Going straight to bed and putting my headphones on.
Yeah.
It feels the most violating, and I think just out of all the stories that I had known at that time, it was the one that I was probably the most familiar with, and I think that Danielle Harris, especially, just like that character, who, I mean, like, it's a little problematic how they presented, someone with like manic depressive disorder or whatever it was that she had. But I think that the irony of the fact that like she's sort of presented as this like antagonistic character to Alicia Witt as like her roommate, I actually felt more badly for her than any of the other characters, like the frat boys or Tara Reid. Because I genuinely felt like, these roommates, even though like we don't see them getting along or anything, or just like it's tense, I imagine like they probably like had moments like, it was like up and down. So you do kind of get a sense of a loss there. And even like as she's kind of like fighting for her life and trying to like scream out to her, and the killer, covers her mouth. Like there's definitely a lot of tension in that moment, which I feel is like, not that it's lacking in the other moments, because I feel like that's more about sort of like the cinematography and the look of the movie when you get to those other set pieces. But this is the one that like definitely feels the most connected or like in tune with an urban legend, because some of the other ones are a bit of a stretch. Like there's like, what urban legend is this? And I feel like it's just, maybe it was just at the time, because now there's probably like just like a plethora of like creepy pastas and stuff that they could draw from. I don't know how they would necessarily do it, but like there was only like so many stories that they can tell, and I know that they wanted to do the sequel, so they were like, we have to save some for the sequel. So yeah, I agree that one is definitely the best. The microwave, just because like you mentioned that with the dog, because that was another, like, that's the one thing, like, I hate when like animals are killed, like you kill all the humans, I don't care, but that was one thing that was just like, oh, so she like killed the dog, like that makes me not like Brenda. But then again, like you like headcanoning stuff, it's just like, well, we didn't actually see the dog die. Maybe she just like put like some like pasta sauce in there and like fooled him into thinking that the dog was
wishful thinking. I think she's crazy enough to have killed the dog.
I think she is crazy enough to microwave his dog.
Parker's death, though, I'm not sure if it ties into if his manner of death spawns from an urban legend or not. That went over my head, but oh man, what an editorial mess.
Yeah,
I thought
it
his
was
death
like-
was very poorly edited.
Yeah, it's a play on the whole like pop rocks and soda because she pours the pop rocks into the
yes.
how'd
that go over my head?
I don't think you need the
but
pop rocks at that point, but yeah.
at that point, you're just like, yeah, that's just for a dramatic effect. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a little
it's just
spotty.
very spottily edited. But now that 2 and 2 being added to my head now makes me appreciate it more. I honestly don't know why I didn't associate that with the pop rocks earlier, but okay, I like that a lot more now.
The Dean. Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was going to say the Dean getting killed in the parkade. That I think that was also a really good set piece as well.
Agreed. Yes.
Very, very well edited. And I also just want to say that what I know, right? But one thing that I really like about this movie, which I think is like maybe excels at, in contrast to Scream, is that it's paced really well just in terms of like the deaths. Like there's really no like break in the movie where I feel like no one's died for a while. Like they really do a good job of like of killing people off. There's like one stretch where it feels like it's the stuff between Jared and Alicia that kind of like it's the same scene over and over again, but like that's it. Like everything around that is just perfect.
Yeah, I agree. And I also love, even though it's not necessarily my favorite set piece, I still get goosebumps at the opening scene where he yells out that there's someone in the back seat. And I remember that moment in the theater vividly because you got like definite chills. And I do love the reveal of her like slowly like creeping up in the back with the axe. I thought that was like really. Yeah. So I mean, there's some issues with the opening scene because like I don't think that girl is particularly like a great actress or anything.
Certainly not a great singer. That was hard on the ears. Love the song choice.
But I also this is like Urban Legend and Strangers Pray at Night have used Total Eclipse of the Heart in a way that is like really effective. Like they use that song in Strangers Pray at Night. It goes really well to like this whole like kind of chase scene, pool scene.
Is it the pool scene? Okay,
I was like,
where that's used in.
I was like, why are more people using this song for like horror movies? Because it like really works if you use it right. And also, I mean, I think horror fan loves a good chase scene. And I actually think Tara Reid's all her stuff, like her chase scene leading up to her death, is also really fun and really good.
Is she Sasha?
Yeah. Like so she it's a really like kind of that reminds me of a lot of like. It's very reminiscent. There's like a chase scene in Prom Night and the original Prom Night that's kind of slimmer-ish. Like you can tell, like you said, like there is like it feels like even though it is very 90s, it does seem like it's paying like homage to like kind of like the 80s like slasher movies of that time and like and a lot of its beats that it kind of goes.
I mean, you've got a lightning storm.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Like, they're like really like going all like ham for it. Like it's really good.
Sasha's
everything that can't go wrong is going on.
Yeah. Sasha's death was another moment of weakness for me, and I think it was more like burdened by the rating of the movie. We don't even see the axe hit her. We don't see any gore.
Jackson loves his gore, just so you know. Like if there's
and there's lots of it in this movie, but that was a moment to really shine, and we get like a good like 4 or 5 axe thwacks, and we don't see any of it. We don't even. I don't think. If I don't recall, I don't think we see even like a splatter or anything from her. It was just a moment. I was like, man, we could have really got a lot more.
There's nothing. But I do love, like right in that moment, like after she axes her, as Natalie,
that was great.
It's so it's so bitchy. Yeah,
it is very bitchy. And then the callback to it later, once she's revealed to be, she gives her the little wave in the room. But I don't think this is intentional, but something I kind of reconcile Sasha's death with a line that I think Brenda delivers later quite poorly amongst like her great performance. She has this line where it's Natalie is telling, it's like in the midst of chaos, there's a chase, and Natalie says, Sasha's been killed or Sasha's dead. And Brenda goes, oh no, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Am I sure? We don't see it happen. So like, you're led to believe that, but we're not seeing it, which pissed me off. I'm like, I kind of, that line, although I think it was poorly executed, it kind of made me laugh because, we don't see it happen, but I had to bring that up too.
I do love when they of course Brenda knows the entire time what she's doing when they find like is it Robert Englund's body in the trunk And like at this point, they've already talked about like, oh, like we forgive each other. I don't really care about Paul and all this stuff. And when she opens the trunk and then she just looks at her, she's like I said, like he's all yours. Like, yeah. And like
that was
still
good
like
too.
and still watching it, like when you're knowing that it's her, like oh, she's still just like fucking with her. It's great.
I
Like,
think
she's just like
what that's another moment that's like so good on like that rewatch, because they're in this moment, they're in like this public place, like this like well-lit gas station. There's lots of people around, and Rebecca Gayheart is sort of the one that like instigates Alicia Witt to like run away into the woods. So it's just like again that manipulation of just like, well, let's go that way, like because I mean like any normal sane person would just like go into where people can see you, where it's lit, and be like, we're calling the police. This guy's
get in the car and drive away. Fuck, Paul's like in the station. Like,
Exactly.
Is it not? Like, is it Brenda too that like initiates this? She's like, "Do you smell that, or something smells bad in here?" I can't remember who notices it first.
It was her.
Brenda.
Okay, which
like everything about that is so funny. Like when they're running away and they get separated, I just imagine like Brenda's like fake fall, like and then try like getting up, like like just annoyed.
That was the moment where I knew she was the killer. When like it was never a surprise to me at the end, because it just like, it was way too suspicious when she had run off. And I think by that point I was just sort of like used to, like, at least with like Mrs. Loomis in Scream 2, it's just like, well, the killer can also be a woman, so it's just like you know, everyone's a suspect sort of thing. That I kind of like at that point I had my suspicions, and I was telling this to Edward when we recorded our podcast, is that I personally see Brenda, like just her performance, she's kind of like a combination of two of my favorite Ghostface killers, which would be Mrs. Loomis and Mickey, both of Scream 2. It's just like she just feels like she kind of has that manic energy, but also sort of like that like sorrowful like revenge aspect of like Mrs. Loomis. And it just like, it's like the perfect marriage of the two. And that's why, like, if Brenda was a Ghostface killer, like she probably would be my favorite. But you know, even speaking of the camp, just sort of like the setup to that scene, and it is very Friday the 13th, of Alicia Witt like kind of coming into this abandoned building, and there's like bodies falling out all over the place. I mean, I guess that's original Halloween.
As well,
but like especially Friday the 13th, which is like Joshua Jackson's like hanging in the door frame there, and then all the candles everywhere, like just
all this work, all this meticulous work. Like, also, it's like, when did she find the time to do all this meticulous work?
She didn't have a partner.
She had no partner. She was like all on her own. I just imagine her just at 4 a.m, just like getting all this done. Like when everyone's like dead
exhausted.
And like it's so funny to think about. I would be remiss not to bring up Loretta Devine, who plays Reese, the security guard, because she actually became like she is a fan favorite. I mean, enough where they were like, they brought her back for the sequel. And
cool.
I love. I mean, Loretta Devine's a great actress. Like, I've seen her in like so many other things too. But like, and to me, no one brings better sass in the movie sometimes than Loretta Devine, and she does bring that. And I just love that she's utilized well. I don't think she's like out of place there. It's enough where I'm like, all right, I buy it. That like she's fun, and I'm glad that she survived too.
Thought it was so great. Like, she's so like inspired or motivated, if you will, by
Pam Grier.
Exactly. Seeing it on the screen, I'm like, no way that is like thrown in this movie. Like, it's so random, but I loved it.
Yeah, she definitely has. No, go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, like, because I mean, until like Brenda kind of reveals herself, like Loretta Devine is kind of like the MVP. Like, she's the one that has like all the funny lines and just like the great moments. Like, I love the when she's kind of wandering through the dark hall, and there's like the lightning out and thunder outside, and then the creepy janitor bumps into her, and she says like, "You trying to give me a heart attack?" And he says, "Boo." She's just like, what the hell's going on?
Like she can't believe this is all happening around her. Like, she's like, how did she get into this kind of situation? But I also love that, she gets to be a hero too. Like, much like the person she watches in movies, who she's like she wants an inspiration for. Like, she gets to do that. And I thought that was like really well executed, and then she's just really funny. Like, when the dean is basically, she's trying to tell the dean about like about Damon being missing and like blah blah blah. Like there's something going on, and then whatever after their whole dialogue is changed, and he walks away, and she just smells like asshole. Like after all that, like it's just like it's just great. I thought she was good, and of course she gets to throw in. She's called Brenda a loony psycho bitch, and that was a great line drop as well.
Yes, it was.
So yeah, she's fun. She's definitely
and she was packing 2 guns, wasn't she?
Yeah,
which was even more.
Oh yeah, she was.
Campus
it's
police.
the whole like. It's a whole like itty bitty mighty that she shoots her like no, and it passes out.
That was great.
She did the Scream 3 Sydney Prescott 2 years before, or like a year and a half before Sydney did it.
When they had 2 guns, like whoa shit,
nice.
she came packing with 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that character was great overall, really fun. But like Jackson, like I think you mentioned some stuff like that you didn't like overall. What was like one of the main things that you're like that didn't really work for you, like while watching it? Didn't work? Yeah.
I thought it was predictable in some spots, even though I didn't necessarily see that it was Brenda coming. I think that could have been part of me splitting out my watch. I watched most of it last night and finished it when I got home from work today. So maybe if I had been tuned in a little bit more, I might have seen it coming, but I was kind of distracted. Thought the acting was flat in some parts. It wasn't consistently bad or consistently good. It was, like I said, I was very conflicted with like how I felt after, but I feel like overall, like I'll give it points for the charm and it being a product of its time. I obviously am going to consider that when I'm thinking about my enjoyment of the movie. Other than that, like I guess it didn't really give me the scares that I wanted. And I should have like really known that going in, and that's not the movie's fault necessarily. That's more on me and how desensitized I am. I gotta say though, and that is so true.
It's like more blood, more gore.
Yeah, more blood, more gore. I guess like although there are tons of slashers I love, like this is not a genre that I find I'm gonna be like scared in. It's really hard to be unique. And this movie does do a couple things, by itself, but I did get the sense that it was kind of like coming on the heels of Scream. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, Plenty of movies I love are inspired by others. I want to give props though to the like the effects department though. As far as like horror movies go, like the blood in this movie was like top notch, looked super genuine, and I kept remarking on that like as I was watching, particularly like the Dean's death scene, and I just had her name, but the campus police who we were just talking about, what's her name again?
Reese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she shot, like I was like, this is some damn good effects work. Yeah, other than that, again, like it wasn't there wasn't things like throughout the entire movie that didn't work. Like, it would work in some places, would not work in others. The editing in some parts, like I said, both Sasha and Parker's deaths kind of threw me off. And again, like that was more, I think, constraints with the rating, because that was, no, I guess the 14A. Well, I don't know when that.
Yeah, it'd be rated R here. Like,
right.
Even though, by today's standards, it's pretty tame. I mean, there's not like a ton of stuff that like like that was a lot. And like you said, like with Sasha's death, they don't really show what you wanted to see.
Yeah, specifically with the opening scene, there was the intent to like show the head rolling.
That's another good one.
Yeah, but then they decided against that and just kind of like have the axe come out the window.
What's happening, but
which I think was like still super effective.
So effective, yeah.
But maybe we're on different pages then. Like I didn't need more, but I don't really like watch these movies for the gore. I just like it's more just like the fun of it all.
Yes.
So I'm not necessarily like I'm desensitized. Like I don't get scared by anything. I think definitely like maybe more so like more contemporary or just like current movies should make an effort to just kind of like be scary. But it's very few and far between that I do see something that does genuinely scare me. But the only weakness really for me is that I don't think that the characters, like the main couple, has any chemistry at all. I think that they're completely boring together. Like I think that they're fine on their own. Like I think Alicia Witt is really good. Jared Leto is also good. But yeah, just when they come together, and that's just like it's just in the middle of the movie, like just that second act where there's just like a series of scenes where it's just like them walking down the quad, just like him trying to like like pump her for information. Then they're in his editor's office. Then they're looking for books. And then they sneak into like Robert Englund's office, and I love that because there was sort of like this like kind of like that was fun. It's just like, oh, you're putting them together in this like kind of dangerous moment, but then that was over really quickly, and then you know kind of find out things there, and it's something that I also noticed in Valentine, because like that movie's excellent, but then there's like this kind of block in the middle of the movie where it's like repeating scenes. It's just sort of like Marley Shelton's character on like dates with David Boreanaz, and then it's just like the detective talking to the ladies, and it's just like it's just more of like exposition dumps, and there's nothing really happening, and it's just like scene back and forth, like they're interchangeable. So it's just sort of like maybe that was just something that they hadn't worked out, or they felt like, well, we have to somehow explain things. And I think it's always better to kind of propel a story forward through the action rather than just slowing things down to kind of like get the story. But when it's, especially when it's with two characters that don't have any chemistry together, that will, you know,
slow it down.
It'll slow the movie, like bring it to a halt very quickly. And I think that's the biggest weakness of Urban Legend, if I could pinpoint one myself.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to like having Jackson, you see this now, like, you know, of course, like I think for us having seen it when it came out, because at this point we had Scream 2. All right, Scream, I know you did last summer. Scream 2, Disturbing Behavior had come out by that point too, like Halloween H2O. It was just like a conveyor belt of like, oh, we're getting so many of these, and it was just so fun. I don't even think at that time that I was like thinking about like diminishing quality of said movies. I was just having fun with like having them, which is probably why we view them a little bit differently than like you seeing it now, because I know you had like a similar thing with like Halloween H2O, where it was like you could tell why it was popular when it came out, especially because it's like, oh, they brought back Laurie Strode, they brought back Jamie Lee Curtis, like that was a big deal. But even then you were like, yo, this is, we haven't had a lot of luck with the late 90s horror movies with you so far.
That's right. But I gotta say, like, there's been movies I've outright hated, and neither of those come close to that. So it's just it's hard, like, you know, you resonate with the movie more, I think, closer to the proximity of when it came out, like when you see it, and your experience with it in the theater obviously is going to be very impactful with how you look at it years down the road, and the success of it now. Also, like this, I think movies have changed a lot since 1998, especially horror movies. So I've come to growing up and seeing the stuff more that was like a product of the time that I was growing up is going to influence how I look at movies going back, which not like isn't the movie's fault. Trying my best to look at them objectively. But that being said, like I have these different expectations and nuances in what I look for in a movie that has been impacted by what I've grown up watching, which obviously you guys having seen it when it come out will be very different, but it's not a bad watch by any means. But yeah, I guess my taste is a little bit more acclimated to different sort of stuff.
Well, man, don't see that sequel.
No, I didn't really know that.
I feel like you were like, oh, this is like a huge step down. I'm like trying to think if there's.
I mean, you never know.
Yeah, you might know. Yeah, it'd be funny if
That's
you
right.
be like, yeah, you might be like, I'd like that one more, and I'll be like, well, that is an interesting take.
Is it Brenda?
No, it's well, no, but
okay. I don't know when I'll get around ever seeing it.
You know what's interesting about Urban Legend Final Cut is like the people that pop up in it. Like Eva Mendes is in it, and you're like, whoa, this is like back when, like, you know, before she was huge. Like Anthony Anderson is in it. Okay. like you're just like oh, these are like some random like people who eventually will become very famous, like in like a couple years, and like it's so random that these like they pop up in that movie. The cast is interesting. It's just not as good.
I think the problem with because Urban Legend 2 is where it sort of like deviates away from the Scream, kind of what they perceive as like being like copying Scream.
I see.
Because it's very like it still kind of does it's a whodunit slasher whodunit. It leans a little bit more into kind of suspense. Whether it's like successfully executed is one thing, but I think the problem with the movie, and this is something that is actually referenced in Scream 5, not about urban legend, but just sort of like the fact that movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th it's this villain coming back again and again. You have Michael Myers, you have Jason Voorhees. Whereas with like Stab or Scream, it's just like, Sidney Prescott keeps coming back. And with Urban Legend 2, you don't have the killer come back, at least like in the capacity as like throughout the movie. And you don't have the final girl or the final boy come back. It's like all new characters and it's a completely new killer. You do have Loretta Devine.
You have Reese.
Comes back, but it's just like, it's still not, there's not enough of a connection to it to kind of like continue a franchise from there. And I think that's why like it wasn't as successful, and then it went to whatever the third one was, which I still have never seen.
Oh my god, there's a third one.
Yeah, it's
holy. Yeah, sounds about right.
It's called Urban Legends Bloody Mary. It's a supernatural slasher film, so it's very different from the other two.
Okay. I would have liked the supernatural element to this, but I don't know where that would have fit in. I think it works better as like a serial killer slasher. That being said, that comparison to the sequel reminds me a lot of Grease 2, it not having the original cast except for one, and I love Grease 2, so there is a chance, however slim.
Oh God, we're gonna have like a Justice for Grease 2 episode courtesy of Jackson.
I would be all over that. I think Grease 2 is fantastic. Michelle Pfeiffer blows me away. Some of the better songs of that series are in the second one. Oh yeah, I would love Grease 2.
Urban Legend, there was a reboot in development pre-COVID, and then they kind of did the kibosh on it for now. I don't know if it's going to happen at all. I think that this is one movie that when the whole reboot thing gets brought up, there are some people that are open to it because, like I said, I love Urban Legend. I think it's fun, but I think other people who might think it's lacking think like, oh, there's a good idea there, and maybe someone could like flesh that idea out more and be a little and execute it a little better, which is I think why some people aren't totally against a reboot if they were to do one. It's not like, of course Scream is still ongoing, but it's not like if someone was like to try to reboot Scream and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, like Urban Legend was fine, and there's a good like story and like element there, but like maybe another director and writer could flesh it out and make it a little bit better.
If I were to like fan cast a director for a reboot, actually, I'd like to hear who comes to mind for you guys, but I would give it to the Philippows, the directors of Talk to Me. I don't know if that's what I'm saying, but I would love to see them tackle something like that.
That'd be kind of fun. Actually,
what about you guys? If it were to be rebooted, who would you want to see in the director's chair?
I would want the consistency. I would want Jamie Blanks to do it. It always kind of like upset me that he kind of had this momentum going of like Urban Legend and Valentine, which are these very niche, like almost like they're very specific thematic movies. And it's almost like and again, like very 80s of just like, here's Halloween, here's prom night, just things that are like centered around very specific stories or dates that I always wanted him to kind of like have that like a third movie, not necessarily connected to Urban Legend or Valentine, but it just like would have been fun if he was just like, had that kind of like triple threat or just like the trifecta of
that would be kind of cool actually.
Things. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't think he directs anymore. But I would love to have him come back and sort of kind of like carry on at least some sort of consistency with the movie, because I still think he did a wonderful job in the first one. And the second one, the director of it, actually, it's funny you mentioned H2O, because the director of Urban Legend 2 was John Ottman.
Ottman, yeah.
Who is the composer who scored H2O, whose score wasn't even used in the movie.
They used the score, yeah.
I mean, he has the main like theme song at the beginning, but everything else was kind of scrapped. And I think he might have composed Urban Legend 2 as well. But it's just like it's interesting when people who aren't traditionally directors kind of step in to fill that role. And I don't want to say anything bad against him, but it definitely did not work the same way it did in the original. So yeah, I think that I don't know much about, sorry, and I forget their names. Like I've seen Talk to Me, I enjoyed it. As far as I know, they're working on a prequel right now, which
that's right. Yeah,
I don't even want to touch that. But I like the idea of just kind of like either like staying consistent or finding like new blood to like do projects like this that are existing IP. Because if it's like someone like it always like struck me as weird that Radio Silence, who were kind of like establishing themselves through films like Ready or Not, that they were then like brought onto Scream, which is totally fine. But then I heard that they were going to be doing a Escape from New York remake, and I don't know how I feel about that, but I also don't like the idea that like I think that they're better than that. I think that they're better than just kind of like coming into pre-existing
IPs
franchises and just picking up the pieces of what has been left behind. Like I'd rather see directors like the brothers who did talk to me do their own original things rather than like go to franchise that already belong to someone else, unless they're bringing in someone completely new to the table who has like a very unique vision that these studios kind of want to foster and put forward into these movies. So I would long story. I would want to see the original director come back.
In terms of
wouldn't mind that either. Actually, Jamie Blanks is also very nice on Twitter. He will exchange like comments and stuff with you. Like he love it seems like he loves seeing the love for Urban Legend and Valentine all these years later, where I think like Urban Legend was successful in its own right. It didn't make as much money as like Scream and stuff, but it was successful in its own right when it came out. But I think a movie like that and like Valentine as well, definitely with like the years that have gone by, like they have grown in popularity, especially when they're like you view them far removed from like it being a part of that whole like rebirth of like the slasher movie when it came out. And then you just like I think once fans start viewing them on their own and they're just like not so like connected to that whole era of those movies, I think about them a bit more positively than they probably did back in 1998. Like they just kind of it hits a new audience. Like a lot of people discover it, people rediscover it in a very different way. So I think that's why with those movies, I didn't even know that Valentine had so much love until I was seeing it on Twitter and Instagram, where like that movie, it came and went when it came out. It wasn't like a huge flop, but it wasn't like a huge hit. Right. But it's one of those things where I see it now, where like people talk about it like it's a classic, and their own, in their own mind, like it's a really fun movie. But I really didn't know that love existed for that movie until like maybe the last year or two, like just seeing so many people talk about it. And it's the same thing with like Urban Legend. I think most people know that it's not like Scream. It didn't reinvent the wheel or anything. Right. But it in its own way, it's fun. And it's I think it holds up pretty well as far as, coming from that era. And like I said, Rebecca Gayheart, I'm just a round of applause for her because that easily could have been like really bad. Like it could have been like, oh, like you're not selling it, but like once she's 100% committed, and it's not even just in that closing moment when you realize it's her. Once you like realize that like, oh, she has been the killer the entire time, you realize how committed Rebecca Gayheart's performance actually is throughout the entire movie. Yeah, and a lot of like what works in Urban Legend works because of her by the end of it.
Yeah, I thought she looked familiar, and I didn't really go too into her filmography, but I wouldn't be surprised if I'd seen her in something else. But what did jump out to me is that she, in a very brief appearance, she is Cliff Booth's wife in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I thought that was hilarious.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that was her last role.
She was the Noxzema girl back in the day, and they actually make a comment about that at the end of Urban Legend.
Saw that. I didn't know what Noxzema was, but I saw that was an actual true comment. Yeah,
and she's also in Scream 2. She's one of the sorority sisters. Because that's when every I think actress in that age group was like, or actor in general was like, yo, I will take any role in Scream 2. Just give me something. They all wanted to be a part of it because it was the first one was such a hit, and so like she popped up in that. She was on Beverly Hills 90210 for like a season. She was Luke Perry's like fiance, and she gets like gunned down, and it's really dramatic. It's very dramatic. Yeah, she was definitely a product of the 90s.
Yeah, I think that other than Urban Legend for me, it's the other role is Jawbreaker, even though she's not like, she doesn't have like as huge like she's kind of like the protagonist of the movie, but she's not she doesn't get to like camp it up as much as she does in Urban Legend, or as like, you know, as much as like Rose McGowan or Judy Greer or even Julie Benz in Jawbreaker. Like they seem to be the ones having the most fun, but it's still like I remember her from that movie because she kind of makes it complete. So yeah, she was in a lot of good stuff.
Yep. All right, so now that we're wrapping things up here, we like to try to give scores to these movies after we've talked about them. Jackson knows I'm going to him first. He's probably what score would you give?
Okay,
Urban Legend.
Again, my score, it's going to sound probably like negative, but then again, there are movies that I enjoy with a score like this. I definitely think the 35 Metascore that it's sitting at right now is harsh. So that being said, I would probably give this one a 5 out of 10 in a positive way, leaning towards 6 closer than 4. You know what I mean?
Okay. All right, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. It has a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. I like looked at it, I was like, oh,
yeah.
I was like, I didn't know that it
That's
was like
tough.
ravaged by critics like that.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Zach?
I would, if we're doing out of 10, I would say 8.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that like Rotten Tomatoes, like anytime I hear anything about Rotten Tomatoes, it's just like baffling to me because like there are horror movies that are coming out today which I think are terrible, which are nowhere near the quality or of entertainment or the fun that Urban Legend is, and like these are movies that are like sometimes like certified fresh. Or at least like, you know,
tell me about it.
Getting up to like Megan, for example, which is not a terrible movie in my opinion, but it's just like to me, like how is something like that? Because I believe that was certified fresh.
That movie was all the rage in like February. Like it's all I heard. Yeah,
and who's talking about it now? But I mean, that's the thing. It's just like something like that would be like beloved by the critics, but like, you know, back 25 years ago they would see a movie like Urban Legend, which is so much like better quality in almost every way possible, that it would then get a 24%. Like, so that's why like sites like Rotten Tomatoes or just like critics in general, I don't tend to agree with or trust.
I'm usually in that same boat. Yeah, sometimes they get it right, but rarely.
I'm gonna go slightly below Zach. I'm gonna give it a 7, like a solid 7.
Okay.
And keep in mind, this is like, you know, there's a lot of nostalgia here, and it's just
of course, yeah.
We kind of like in our case kind of brought up with it, and we saw it when it came out, and we saw it, you know, during the height of all this stuff. I mean, I think Jackson, if you were like aware, like if you were like our age when these movies were coming out again, and they were becoming popular again, it was a really fun period between like 96 to like early 2000, where it was just like, oh, there was so many of these, and like, you know, of course we grew up watching like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, but it was cool that we were getting horror movies that were like, it was for our generation, and it was like these were our movies, and that's what made them
of course
so much fun. So yeah, there might be some rose-colored glasses for some of us watching.
But I have plenty of movies that I look back like I put the nostalgia goggles on when I'm watching. Like, so I think even if I had seen this in my youth, not even at the time when it came out, but like I was still watching horror movies in like the mid to late 2000s when I was still considered a youngin, that I would love now. Like, for instance, like an example would be like Alien versus Predator. By no means a fantastic movie, but I would give that movie like an 8 in terms of like how I enjoy it. So if I had seen this a little bit earlier, I bet you I would like it a lot more. I just don't have that nostalgia tie, which is unfortunate, but you know, a few more years might change that score.
Gaius, I don't mean to push back against your nostalgia spiel there, but I mean, I feel that because there are movies that we've talked about, like Halloween H2O, that I feel like that to me is nostalgia, because I watched that movie today, and I love it for how I loved it back then, but I look at it and I'm just like, this is not good. And in a similar way, I feel that about, and not to say that like Halloween H2 is a bad movie. I think there's a lot to love about it, especially in terms of Jamie Lee Curtis's performance. But, you know, even like Bride of Chucky, like I'm not a huge fan of like the third act of that movie. I feel like it just kind of like flounders. But that, you know, that's why, like, you know, I hear people say like, well, you're just nostalgic about this, you're just nostalgic about that, and I couldn't disagree more, because like I think that like at this point I've sort of like honed personally like on what I consider nostalgia and what I make allowances for in terms of like, okay, I know this isn't good, but I love it, just like what you were saying, Jackson. But there are things that I watch and I'm just like, no, this is actually really good, and these are the things that, you know, still hold up and actually like I can view them better. And I think that Urban Legend is one of those. Like I don't have any nostalgia towards that, because if I did, like I would have been like crazy about this movie back when it came out. And I don't think that I liked or disliked it any more than any of the other movies that came out, because like you said, it was just sort of like that was the thing. We weren't thinking about the movies in terms of just like oh, this is coming out. It was just sort of like an assembly line of everything that was just sort of like, oh great, another movie. And that's kind of what it was at the time. So I don't know, just my own perspective
that's fair.
of nostalgia.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. All right. Well, thank you, Zach, for joining us for this discussion. This is the point of the show where we want you to plug yourself, tell everyone where they can find you, whatever you want to mention. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, both of you, for having me. This has been a lot of fun talking about this movie. And you can find me on YouTube. My main channel is Zach Cherry, ZACKCHERRY. I've also got my podcast, The Cherry Picker, which you can also find on YouTube, but you can also stream on wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, so I'm on social media too. You can follow me on Instagram is Retro Bitch Face. Twitter,
I love that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Twitter is ZachCherry8. Letterboxd also Zach Cherry, and
that's a good one. I don't think to promote. You're the first person I think we've had on that has mentioned that.
Mentioned their Letterboxd.
That is great.
Yeah, follow everyone on Letterboxd. Just go look for and then what else is there? I don't did I say Twitter? I don't think there's anything else. Yeah.
He's everywhere. And then we'll of course we will link all your stuff at the bottom of the description for this episode, so they can also find you there as well. This has been the fun, like I said, this has been the fun part for Jackson and I doing this so far. Even though you're our third spooky season guest, like it's been really cool bringing on different people to talk about these different movies in the horror genre. And once again, like 3 for 3, another great guest for us. So thank you for being on. And if you ever want to be on again in the future, you are more than welcome to come back and be on with us. Like it was a really good time.
Let me know. I'm down.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jackson, sign us on off.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. This has been episode 122 of Back to the Blockbuster. Thank you so much, Zach Cherry, for joining us today on this equal parts urban legend, equal parts Scream discussion, which unexpected, but super encouraged. We loved it. It's been a blast. Similar to Zach, you guys can find us anywhere on social media and anywhere podcasts are streamed at Back to the Blockbuster. Check us out on Playlist app on the iOS store for you iPhone users. Gaius, as always, looking forward to chatting our next spooky season material later. Always a pleasure. Zach, again, thanks for joining us at Back to the Blockbuster. And thank you guys for listening. You guys take care of yourselves.